is a state coordinator, which is the state. He was a state coordinator, and it was a state, but he was also a branch, not an area coordinator for a number of different states. He asked us to indicate our first three choices and promised that he would seek guidance from God of who would be the best to fill the various positions. He said we would get the job that God wanted us to have, which might not be the job for which we indicated a preference. We were assured that our work assignments would be confirmed within a week. With all the new people in the area, Duke needed twig leaders for the city. 5 of us volunteered for twig duty. Duke shared with us that although the city was the home of the state headquarters, there had not been a PFL class ran there for the past 3 years. He wanted to see this change. Those of us on the way twig duty resolved to run more PFL classes than any other location in that state. Rose and I had discussed with Bob about living together. Bob was also an apprentice Way Corps, the same as we were. He had decided to move to Stockton. Bob, Rose, and I agreed to share an apartment. Because of the issues that came up during our WOW year, Rose did not want to live with another woman. She preferred to be the sole female decision maker when it came to managing household matters. Twigs were formed and branch assignments issued. I was to be responsible for the public explanations for the PFL class. It was exciting. We were closer to the leadership and the heart of the ministry than we had ever been. I regard it as an awesome responsibility and honor to make sure that everything ran smoothly and do all I could to assist with securing the stability and the expansion of the ministry. We found out our work assignments for the LIM, and I would be in charge of sending out PFL and other class material to different parts of the state. We rented a furnished apartment, settled in, and began our search for work. Above all the other responsibilities, we were to hold full-time jobs. Rose secured a job as a teaching assistant. Bob as an architect, and I worked as a maintenance worker for an apartment complex. My work lasted only 2 weeks because I lacked the skills and knowledge needed to keep the complex in repair. I felt sure that my release from the job was the work of the devil, who wanted to make my life miserable because he recognized me as a powerful way believer and a powerful force to be reckoned with. I was someone who needed to be taken down. I soon found a job selling insulation. That employment lasted 2 weeks due to the public's lack of interest in the product and due to my inability to sell it. Again, I blame the devil for robbing me of that job. For a while I cleaned gutters and did odd jobs in homes and commercial buildings. I was moderately successful, but the work did not sustain me for long. Following that, I worked for a sports store. After a month, I was laid off because business was slow. My string of failed work experiences affected me in a profoundly negative ways. I was fighting not to sink into deep depression, which was a fact that I could not mention to anyone in the way. To do so would be perceived as more proof positive that the devil had more power over me than God. If I said anything to anyone, I most certainly did not want to be held up as an example of a weak believer who positioned himself to be taken down and then used by the devil. Rose was neither helpful nor understanding during these times. Her only effort was to make a few feeble attempts at casting devil spirits out of me. So there I was, a man to whom God had given great and awesome responsibilities, who was in need of having the devil exorcised from him. A man too depressed to get out of bed on some days. One who was deeply involved in his faith and serving as a twig leader, member of the Apprentice Corps, was responsible for the extension and outreach department for the LIM and in charge of the public explanations of the PFL class for the branch. Having been given this array of daunting responsibilities from God, how could it be that I was deep in depression and devil-possessed? Surely, I thought, God would not have given me the spiritual responsibilities if he had not equipped me to handle them. I was confused, lonely, hurt, and tormented by the possibility that I might have brought on my problems because my faith was not sufficiently strong. I loathed myself for possibly having weak faith. I thought it would be only a matter of time before the way leadership would discover my secret and would banish me from all ministry involvement. Eventually, I found steady work as a temporary work company. My first job was working in a hospital laundry department. The employment was short-term. My next assignment was at a warehouse loading and unloading animal feed. I was then moved to an automotive warehouse where my responsibility was to pack replacement parts to send them to dealerships. This steady work helped me to feel better about myself. It was not a super amount, but it was enough to meet our needs. However, we needed more to have our tuition paid for the Way Corps, and this was always in the back of my mind. In spite of my erratic work situation, my ministry responsibilities were progressing well. There was 15 of us working together running a number of PFAL classes. The twigs seemed to be growing. Once a month, the apprentice corps would go to assignments at various places in Northern California for the purpose of recruiting new followers. We became a close-knit group who worked well together. Living together, however, gave us rise to some problems. Rose, Bob, and I got along well. Others who were living in other parts of the city, not so much. There were problems with sexual indiscretions and more. Nevertheless, as a large group, we were successful with the growth of the Way in Stockton and with the efficient management of the LIM office. As a twig leader, I was responsible for 9 people. 3 nights a week, I would teach or ask others in the group to teach in my place. Most of the people were married and advanced class graduates. I felt an awesome responsibility to direct these believers and felt that I had to be on top of every situation that emerged in their personal lives. One of my twig members, Jack, was having a number of problems. He had been WOW the year before and had decided to take a position on the LIM staff. He was not adjusting well to the demands made on him in his staff position, and he could not hold a job. Everyone tried to help him, but nothing seemed to work. Duke decided that Jack was not sufficiently productive and dismissed him from all his responsibilities. Jack left Stockton for good. I never heard from him again. Jack's departure reflected how the Way would remove a person from a position of, or if the person voluntarily left the Way. And the believer's response: it was done in secret, and the other believers in the group never knew what circumstances would have triggered a departure. It was only our assumption that departing people could not cut the spiritual mustard and had allowed themselves to be poisoned where they could easily be overtaken and rendered them non-functional by the devil. And that is what caused their departure. As believers, we were taught that we were more than conquerors. Anything less were of evil influences. We were not allowed to show any signs of weakness, failure, misgivings, or cracks in our belief in terms of what the Way was teaching us. Questions concerning anything the Way taught was forbidden and considered a sign of weakness and spiritual maturity. We were told anything negative happening in our lives, and especially any doubts, came about because we were weak in believing the teachings that were given to Werewolf via the direct and divine revelation from God. It was unthinkable for us to consider that perhaps the teachings of Werewolf or the Way were wrong. Such thoughts were spiritual treason, and if found out would be reason to expel us from the Way. Even though it hurt when people left, we sincerely wanted those departing to get their walk straight with God. In some cases, we tried to take the fallen back into the fold, but only if they would admit that they were wrong in their thinking and actions. Only when they acknowledged that their departure did not reflect anything wrong with the Way. The last thing we wanted for ourselves was to become weak in our own belief system. Therefore, it was easier and more convenient to blame someone for falling away from the faith and forget about them. than it was to try to bring them back into the fold. Departing persons were a reminder of what could happen to us if we grew weak in our beliefs, and keeping them at a mental and physical distance served us well. Our view was that those who left the way had been tricked by the devil. They were now possessed in a position to trick others in the same way, since they were under the devil's spell. We had to protect the ministry and ourselves from the devil and his evil-doing lackeys. That included all those who had left the way, willingly or not, because we held these views. Were not inclined to give any serious thoughts as to whether those who left the way may have had some valid reasons for leaving. They left. We were right in our thinking. They were wrong. We were under the protective wings of God. They were under the evil influence of the devil. Our ways of looking at things were often in the most simplistic terms. Life is easier to deal with if everything is seen in black and white. As time went on, Rose and I were getting things together for our first year in residence. We had been given a list of things that we were to bring with us when we came into the Way Corps. My parents also were becoming more accepting of my involvement in the Way. I wrote my parents about the need for our first year's tuition. I asked them if they would assist by using a college fund that they had set aside for me to help pay our tuition. I suggested that if they had any doubts or concerns about the wisdom in supporting our involvement in the Way, they should visit the Way headquarters in New Knoxville, Ohio. They said they would visit there within a month. I was excited. I knew that after they visited headquarters, they would fall in love with the idea that we were committing ourselves to the leadership training with the Way. My parents were true to their words. They visited headquarters and then sent us a check for $3,000. They wrote that although the Way doctrine was different from what I had learned as a child, they saw nothing wrong with it. We were told my father would soon be taking the PFAL class himself. I was elated seeing God was working in wonderful ways in terms of mending the relationship I'd had with my parents. After my father's PFAL class started, I called to ask how things were going. My mother explained that he attended the first 4 sessions, but skipped the 5th in order to go to a gun show. He was told that he would have to start the class over again, but he declined. I knew my dad had a mind of his own, so I did not press the issue. He still had the books, and I was sure that he would complete the full class in due time. A couple of months later, I was surprised to receive a large envelope from my parents. It contained some newspaper articles and a 10-page letter. By looking through the material, it was clear that my parents had been mingling with people who had had a lot of information on the Way, and none of it was positive. The article described the Way as a destructive cult, and included in the letter from my parents was their offer to have me deprogrammed at their expense. It also included an admission that they had deep regrets that they sent the money for our tuition. Reading the contents of the envelope, I was stunned, confused, disillusioned, offended, and hurt. How could my parents send us money and be okay with our involvement, and then do an about-face and turn against us? I assumed that they had somehow encountered some devil spirit-possessed ex-followers of the Way, who had offered us up a pack of lies that influenced my parents in adverse ways. I took the contents of the envelope to the region coordinator, Duke Clark, and asked him what I should do. He asked me what I thought of the articles. I said that I could not believe my parents would buy into this misinformation in these articles after they'd seen the headquarters firsthand. Duke did not want the articles, so I discarded them. I did not go to my parents' home for the next 3 years, and ended communication with them for a while as well. In the springtime, I was walking toward the LIM office from a family that I had been recruiting. I noticed some magnificent roses on some neglected rose bushes that grew alongside an abandoned home.